In 2008, when the Human Embryology Bill was being debated, MPs were given a free vote on reducing the time limit for abortion in this country from 24 weeks to as little as just 12 weeks. Most of the focus from campaigners was on a reduction to 20 weeks. But before I look at the principal argument given, we should consider just who such a reduction would be targeted at. Only about 1.5% of all abortions take place in this period, with most of them occurring in the last 2 weeks. At 20 weeks, women have what is sometimes called the abnormality scan. It is at this point that about half of fetal abnormalities may be detected. In some cases, the problems may be so great that a woman will consider abortion. So late in pregnancy, it must be a very difficult decision, where parents must determine if they have the ability, emotionally, physically, and perhaps financially, to raise such a child. Sometimes they may even feel that it would not be right to bring the child into the world. It is a decision that ultimately only the mother can make, and it is usual to take a couple of weeks to reach. There are other reasons for abortions at this stage, but they are also extraordinary, and it is these women that such a reduction will target. There really will be no casual abortions at this late stage, or if there were, they would be very, very few, though we may still argue that it is not a relevant detail. If the limit were reduced to 20 weeks, then there are two possibilities. Either these abortions could not be carried out, regardless of the consequences for the lives of the parents and the child they will have, or they will have to make an almost immediate decision upon diagnosis in order for the procedure to still be legal. Many of those calling for a reduction to the time limit to 20 weeks, including David Cameron, employed an argument from viability. This argument states that because modern medicine has increased the survival rate of premature babies born in this range, we should cease abortions accordingly by lowering the limit to a point at which viability is beyond question. This argument comes to us from the anti-abortion movement, at a time when some of them were openly changing their strategy, stating that, as they couldn't achieve an outright ban at this time, they would work to chip away at the time limit little by little until they achieved their real goal. We can safely assume that they do not themselves accept the argument to be valid, as it would allow abortion to take place so long as the technology does not exist to make the fetus viable outside of the womb. The argument is promoted by them as a strategy, and we need to keep that in mind if we are to understand how we should engage with it. And now is the time to be considering the matter again with some care. During the election, our now Prime Minister, David Cameron, again used this argument in saying that he wished Parliament to revisit the issue, and it is not unreasonable to assume that this may happen sometime in the near future. The argument has not gone unchallenged in this time, and it was pointed out the first time around that it fails on its own terms, because research showed that the survival rates of these babies had not seen significant improvement. This does raise legitimate questions regarding Mr. Cameron's honesty. He certainly cannot be unaware of this. However, I wish to contend that engaging with the argument on its own terms in this way is a serious mistake that could cost the pro-choice movement credibility in the long run. We need to consider just what principle the argument is based upon. There is something very strange about it. The claim seems to be that the ethics of abortion rests upon something as arbitrary as the current state of medical technology. It has to do this because if it was based upon viability in principle, then it would operate from conception. We don't have the technology now, but in principle there is no reason why the technology could not be developed for the embryo to survive and grow outside of the womb from the moment of conception. If this principle was adopted, then it must assume either the doctrine of ensoulment, which is essentially an article of faith and so cannot have legal weight, or that the ethics of abortion rest upon species rather than upon being a person. Instead, it relativizes the ethics to current technology and, by implication, upon where you happen to be in the world, and in some cases upon how much you can afford of that available healthcare. But I don't think that we should be looking for coherence in this argument. It is not a real argument at all. Something this bizarre is not there to represent anyone's actual view, particularly if the people making it are committed to ensoulment at the moment of conception. I believe that it is a pitfall. In a democracy, people can only effect change by gaining the backing of a majority, either nationally or among members of a parliament or other elected representatives, who are usually given a free vote on matters of conscience. Since the first democracy in Athens, there have been two ways of achieving that goal. The first is through reasoned debate. Ideally, it is the sort of debate in which you may yourself change your opinion. The point of such a debate is to reach the right answer and a common understanding of it. The second has probably been, and continues to be, by far the more successful of the two: persuasion by means of rhetoric. This device is not concerned with what is the right thing, but with persuading the required majority of a desired opinion, saying whatever it is necessary to achieve that end. The argument from viability is an excellent example of this. First of all, it avoids any of the difficult philosophical debates surrounding abortion, and it avoids any religious content, making it accessible to everyone without their having to think too hard about it, or to object to a faith being imposed upon them. It also couches the matter in objective medical science, which is a popular rhetorical device, to add a degree of credibility. And finally, it is easier to engage with the argument on its own terms than it is to demonstrate the invalidity of its underlying principle. Because of this, all of the attention has been focused on the claim that the viability outside of the womb has improved. By engaging with the argument in this way, by voicing the objection that viability has not improved, we are implicitly endorsing the principle behind it, or at the very least, that is how it will be portrayed and perceived. The result is a win-win scenario for the pro-life lobby. Either they persuade people now that the limit should be reduced, or they will persuade them when viability really does improve, and in time it certainly will. When that time comes, the pro-choice movement may find itself at a disadvantage. By implicitly endorsing the argument's principles, it will have conceded ground to the pro-lifers. When viability does improve, the only option would be to try and discredit the principle of the argument, and such a switch of tactics will be used as a rhetorical weapon, suggesting that the pro-choice movement is insincere and willing to say anything to get its own way. The only way to avoid this future problem is to avoid the matter of viability now and target the principle from the outset. It is the harder battle, but that is what the pro-life lobby will be counting on. It is, however, the right battle.